Thank you so much for joining us for CBN Newswatch. I'm Ephraim Graham. Ahead today, President Joe Biden announcing his bid for re-election, facing stiff headwinds as most Americans don't want him to run again. And why is Tucker Carlson out at Fox? We'll take a look. Plus, Russia kidnapping children in Ukraine and sending them to distant areas where they're brainwashed and turned against their own families.
They were transferred to some regions in Russia without any connection, without even cell phones.
Our conversation with the couple portrayed in the film Jesus Revolution, talking about spiritual awakening 50 years ago and what it would take to bring revival today.
If you want to see a revival, do revival-like things. Stop waiting for some emotional experience. Just go out and do what God's called you to do.
And with today's fast-paced, high-stress lifestyle and divided culture and politics, we're going to bring you some important tips to keep yourself mentally healthy.
Brain and mental health, just like spiritual health, is a daily practice.
Those stories and more today on CBN Newswatch.
This is CBN Newswatch.
I want to begin this half hour with President Biden announcing his plans to run for re-election in 2024 today in a video message. His announcement coming as he's seeing some of the lowest approval ratings of his presidency. CBN News White House correspondent Abigail Robertson has our top story.
The president announcing his re-election bid 4 years to the day after he began his first run. In a video released this morning, he repeated his theme that there's a battle for the soul of America, and he's asking voters to help him finish the job he started.
That's why I'm running for re-election. Because I know America. I know we're good and decent people.
While it's still early in election season, the odds are good that 2024 will be a rematch of President Biden versus former President Donald Trump. Despite recent troubling poll numbers for the sitting president, 88% of Democrats stand ready to support their current leader.
This president has shown extraordinary leadership.
A new NBC poll reveals 70% of all Americans, including 51% of Democrats, don't want Biden to run again, with nearly half of respondents citing the 80-year-old president's age as the reason.
It's legitimate for people to raise issues about my age. It's totally legitimate to do that. And the only thing I can say is watch me.
While Robert Kennedy Jr. has announced he's running for the Democratic ticket, Nathan Gonzalez from Inside Elections tells CBN News he thinks it's unlikely Biden will face a major challenger in the primary.
There are some Democrats who maybe have concerns, but when they look around at who could be the alternative, there isn't an heir apparent. And so that brings Democrats back to Biden.
Adding Republicans see an opportunity in a Biden re-election bid, with voters concerned about issues like inflation in the economy, as well as the ongoing crisis on our southern border.
They see his polling numbers, that he's an unpopular president. He's the incumbent, which means he'll be held more responsible for the problems that are facing the country. But they also have to show that they can beat him. They've faced Biden once before, and they've come up short.
The NBC poll also revealed Biden's approval rating has dropped to 41% among all adults and 30% among independents.
Democrats are actually optimistic. I mean, they realize that his polling numbers aren't great, but he is the president of the United States. He won in 2020. Democrats overperformed in 2022 when he was in office, and they feel like he is their best candidate moving forward.
Because of the COVID-19 pandemic, President Biden spent most of 2020 campaigning on Zoom calls from his home in Delaware. This campaign will be very different than his last, as many Americans question whether or not Biden, the oldest American president, can physically and mentally handle another run. Reporting for CBN News, Abigail Robertson.
There's a great deal of speculation around the departure of Tucker Carlson from Fox News. The surprise announcement Carlson and the network had agreed to part ways gave no explanation. The Los Angeles Times is reporting Carlson's exit is related to a discrimination lawsuit filed by Abby Grossberg, a Fox producer fired by the network last month. She said she was bullied and subjected to anti-Semitic comments. Carlson's senior executive producer was also fired. Sources also told The Times the decision to fire Carlson came from Fox chairman Rupert Murdoch, with input from Fox board members and executives. Multiple media reports also say Carlson's text messages criticizing Fox management were uncovered in the lawsuit by Dominion Voting Systems, and that may have played a role in this termination. And another major media personality is out of a job as CNN fired anchor Don Lemon. CNN gave no public explanation. The move coming a little over 2 months after Lemon apologized for on-air comments about Republican presidential candidate Nikki Haley being past her prime, although Lemon had been involved in other controversies as well. I want to turn now to the war in Ukraine. Moscow is under fire for the latest accusation of atrocities against Ukraine. Tens of thousands of children have been forcibly taken from their families, shipped to remote parts of Russia, and then illegally adopted. The international community is calling out Russia for this war crime, while non-governmental organizations are scrambling to rescue these children and return them to their families. CBN contributor Chuck Holton is on this story.
Ukrainian children are being used as pawns in Russia's ongoing war against Ukraine. Vladimir Putin is accused by the International Criminal Court of unlawful deportation of children. Ukrainian authorities are pushing for the return of thousands of Ukrainian kids taken from their own country and forcibly adopted into Russian families.
The numbers of the children vary anywhere from 16,000 that have been proven to by name. It's 16,000, like 121 children, so it's by names, to over 300,000 that the Russian Commissioner for Children's Rights is claiming that they've taken over. And these children have been illegally taken to Russia. These are Ukrainian children, and given Russian citizenship and being adopted into Russian families really illegally.
Last May, President Putin changed Russian adoption laws to simplify the process and enable these illegal adoptions.
Majority of them do have living parents or relatives, and so they have been illegally, many of them have been forcefully separated from their parents when the parents were taken into so-called filtration camps, where the parents have been checked for their allegiance to Ukraine and would be charged, with that as a crime, and the children would be separated and taken into Russia or some into the occupied Crimea.
When the mother with her 4-year-old daughter tried to pass this filtration camp, and then they separate her from her daughter, and she had to give her little daughter to some woman she even didn't know, and we still don't know what happened to her.
The children are often sent to remote parts of Russia where they're brainwashed and turned against their own families.
They were transferred to some regions in Russia without any connection, without even cell phones. They have no money. They have no even opportunity to connect with Ukrainian authorities or relatives in Ukraine.
The ICC has issued an arrest warrant charging Putin and his Children's Rights Commissioner with war crimes for these disturbing practices. The Russians say they took the children for their protection and are working with foreign organizations to repatriate them.
Last summer, they've encouraged parents to send them to the summer camps so that the children would have some alleviation from war, and then they never returned the children.
Ukrainian authorities are working tirelessly to have these children returned. On April 9th, a group of 31 Ukrainian children were reunited with their families here in Kyiv, a happy ending to an ongoing nightmare for at least a few Ukrainian mothers. But there are many more still missing.
It is maybe unreal to realize that those things are going on just now, are happening in the center of Europe, but they do. These things are happening, and just imagine what those women feel.
Chuck Holton, CBN News, Ukraine.
Coming up, the real-life pastor and his wife depicted in the movie Jesus Revolution. Greg and Cathe Laurie reveal how much of the movie is true to life. They'll also share what's currently happening in their California church. We're going to hear from them when we come back. Stay with us. Worldwide, millions have now seen the film Jesus Revolution. The box office hit introduces audiences to a young pastor, Greg Laurie, and his wife, Cathe. Wendy Griffith talked to the couple about the real events behind the movie and about the possibility of another Jesus Revolution in the making.
This thing that we found, I feel like I belong. You're gonna need a bigger church.
Jesus Revolution takes viewers back to the late 1960s for the beginning of a spiritual awakening when thousands of hippies put down their drugs, picked up their Bibles, and followed Jesus.
Hey, Cathe!
No.
Come here! I think there's a guy who wants to meet you.
It's also the story of two young people who met, fell in love, and became pioneers of the Jesus movement.
See, I would rather expand my mind.
That couple, Greg and Cathe Laurie, who celebrate 50 years of marriage next year, never dreamed that part of their life would one day be featured on the big screen.
I think one of the unique features of this film is it's a multi-generational movie. Like, I've heard so many stories of the grandparents, the parents, and the kids, and even the grandkids coming, and all of them connecting to some aspect of the movie because there's so many stories woven together.
As for the movie version of their love story, the Lauries say the writers and producers got it right, although they did break up several times before finally making it official.
Did her dad ever warm up to you?
Oh, yeah. No, I had a great relationship. His name is Dick. I called him Dad. And I put myself in his shoes. I come walking into their house. I had hair past my shoulders, a full beard, and a red beard, by the way. Yeah. So I come walking in, and he's kind of, who is this guy wanting to date my daughter? And when I finally asked him for permission to marry his daughter, he very calmly said, no. And he told me why. But, you know, when we did get married, you know, they warmed up.
So, Cathe, when did you know that Greg was the one?
She's still asking that question. We're closing in on 50 years, so.
It was a conclusion I came to, even though I was only 17, after having broken up 2 or 3 times, that I had these spaces when we weren't dating that I would sort of look at the landscape of the guys I knew. I always was comparing them to Greg, and I was like, that's what I want. I want a guy who knows what he wants, knows he's following Jesus first.
This is Pirates Cove, a very windy Pirates Cove, where they filmed those powerful baptism scenes in Jesus Revolution. But for Pastor Greg and Cathe, this was more than great filmmaking. They lived it.
This is where we did the baptisms and still do them today. It's almost like it was a character in the film in a way, because the movie starts with it. In the middle section of the film, my character, played by Joe Courtney, is baptized by Lonnie Frisbee, played by Jonathan Rumi. It's a big moment, and then it's there at the end. I think the reason those baptism scenes work so powerfully is because God was at work while we were shooting them. On one occasion, when we were shooting the scene with Greg and Lonnie, where Greg prays with Lonnie, extras were coming to Christ and wanting to be baptized for real.
For the Lauries, the Jesus movement never really ended. Greg went on to be the pastor of Harvest Christian Fellowship near LA and draws thousands to his Harvest Crusades. When asked if we're going to see another Jesus Revolution in America, they are cautiously optimistic.
I hope so, and I pray so, and I feel if we don't see one, I tremble to think of what our future is and the collision course we're on right now on so many levels. On geopolitical issues, what's happening around the world, the threats to our nation, the threat to the stability of world peace.
I will say there is a huge desperation.
Yeah.
I sense it among the young people in our church, the young adults in particular. They are longing for a real experience with God, and they want to experience that in worship and in people getting saved.
Pastor Greg believes true revival starts with the individual.
If you want to see a revival, do revival-like things. Stop waiting for some emotional experience. Just go out and do what God's called you to do. Only God can send a revival, but only I can preach the gospel.
You might expect this faith couple with 50 years of ministry behind them to start slowing down a bit, but the Lauries seem to be getting a second wind.
Yes, the movie has sort of opened some unusual doors and given us a much wider platform, and now that it's going to be going international,
now Cathe's getting recognized.
More people.
They literally pushed me away. They want to talk to Cathe.
Yeah, right. Not. But I just want to do what God wants me to do until he says, we're going home now. We're done. And there are times when, when the work is intense and we're very busy and we do get tired at times. But I do feel more passionate about sharing the gospel. And we have the answer. We have this treasure hidden in these vessels. It has brought me back to those early days of what it was like to be passionately in love with Jesus, to the point where I had to tell people.
Wendy Griffith, CBN News, Los Angeles.
And just like in the 1970s, America is divided today. It's by social media, COVID, and political fights. The events of the last few years have led to a serious mental health epidemic. A psychiatrist tells CBN News about the easy ways you can use to retrain your brain to ward off depression and anxiety. We've got the story for you coming up right after this. A steady bombardment of news, divisive politics, and social media addiction. These are all big factors in the historic rise of anxiety and depression in America. The good news, you can learn how to protect your mental health. CBN medical reporter Laurie Johnson explains.
America faces a mental health crisis unlike any time in its history, with far too many struggling with depression, anxiety, and more.
There's so many reasons that things are just going the wrong way.
Psychiatrist Daniel Amen blames a culture overwhelmed by hyper-divisive politics,
where people bully each other if they don't have the same beliefs.
Information overload.
The news is about negativity and frightening people.
And social media addiction that can prove harmful to adults and children.
That cause them to constantly compare themselves to false images, to other people who are really pretty unhappy, but they make themselves seem very happy.
That's just the beginning. Turns out there are dozens of things that can contribute to poor mental health. The good news is with the right information, we can fight back and expect better thoughts and feelings. Dr. Amen recommends a path to success in Change Your Brain Every Day.
Brain and mental health, just like spiritual health, is a daily practice.
Step 1 involves taking care of perhaps the body's most amazing organ where emotions and ideas originate.
I have to focus first on brain health, which means you have to eat better, you need to exercise, and you need to not drink and not do magic mushrooms. You have to keep the physical functioning of your brain healthy. And when you do, it's so much easier to be happier.
A brain-healthy diet is 70% fruits and vegetables and 30% good protein like salmon and healthy fat like olive oil.
And sugar is the enemy of brain health.
Another way to protect your brain is by avoiding hits to the head, which can lead to traumatic brain injury.
From falls, from car accidents, from fights. And there are other professions besides football players that have an increased incidence of brain trauma, especially firefighters. There's a very high incidence of depression and suicide among firefighters.
Dr. Amen recommends a protocol that can help people recover from certain brain injuries. It includes fish oil, vitamin D, and in some cases, hyperbaric oxygen therapy.
It significantly increases blood flow to the brain.
Taking breaks from the smartphone to personally connect with nature and people can improve mental health, although it can be difficult for some.
Being unable to put your phone down. There's actually studies that say people would rather give up sex than their phone. That's a problem.
Getting away from that screen can also dramatically improve your mood and thinking by consistently getting a better night's sleep.
If you don't put blue light blockers on your phone, that blue light coming from your gadgets, your computer or your phone, actually turns off the production of melatonin and makes sleep much harder.
And finally, instead of letting our thoughts run wild, take control and steer them in the right direction.
I start every day with, today is going to be a great day. I direct my mind to help me rather than hurt me. At the end of every day, I say a prayer and then I go, what went well today?
So while far too many suffer from depression, anxiety, and related issues, there are ways we can try to improve our mental health.
Whenever you go to make a decision, just ask yourself, is this good for my brain or bad for it?
Laurie Johnson, CBN News.
Coming up, some beautiful sights in the sky. We'll take a look and tell you where they're coming from when we come back. Stay with us. The Northern Lights moved south for a little while because of an intense solar storm. The sun sent out a blast of super hot material late last week, hurling plasma gases toward Earth at nearly 2 million miles an hour. The brunt of the storm hit Earth Sunday. Here in the U.S., sky gazers took in the sights from Wisconsin, Washington State, Colorado, California, New Mexico, and even Arizona. Mostly a reddish glow instead of the typical green shimmer. And as the solar cycle ramps up, there could be more lights in the sky still to come. Time now for your Tuesday Tweetable. I share this thought with you and hope you will post, tag, tweet, and share it with those in your circles of influence. The miracle you need is already in your hand. You are praying and waiting on God, and He's answering. I've already equipped you to handle it. You're waiting on Him, but He's waiting on you. With that word, trust God and take action. Do it. You've got the power. That is going to do it for this edition of CBN News Watch. I want to remind you, you can always find more of our programs on the CBN News Channel. You can find them there at any time, as well as online at cbnnews.com. We would love to know what you think about the stories you've seen here today. You can email us. The address is right there at the bottom of your screen, newswatch@cbn.com. And of course, you can always reach out and touch us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Make it a great Tuesday. We'll see you back here tomorrow.